Jim, I'm looking on your wall of all of these CDs that you've produced, engineered, played on, written for. I see John Prine, Tom Dundee, John Martin, Rick Denko, Levon Helm, Mavis Staples, Jim Weeder, David Bromberg, Johnny Cash. I mean, it's quite a list. Steve Goodman. Fred Holstein, a very important figure on the Chicago folk scene. Jethro Burns. I know you're currently working on the Five Blind Boys.
Well, actually, it's Clarence Fountain and Sam Butler.
Okay.
Clarence is the only original Blind Boy alive. They actually left the Blind Boys. So it's Clarence Fountain and Sam Butler.
Okay.
But the other singers are the other Blind Boys, so it's the Blind Boys.
Right.
But they're not called the Blind Boys. It's called Clarence Fountain and Sam Butler.
I see.
But the Blind Boys, when they go out and play, Clarence is not with them. So it's like hearing the Beatles without John Lennon.
I see. Interesting. And just to tie that in with Mavis, with the gospel, the kind of soul gospel sound, I've heard some of that stuff and it sounds incredible.
That's the first gospel record I ever did.
Really?
It was Mavis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happened when 9/11 happened. I lost two friends in that, which was really odd because I'm living in Chicago. And they were both very unusual circumstances. One of them was a guy named John O'Neill, who I actually went to high school with. He was a really good friend of my sister's, but I knew him as well. And he had worked for the FBI for 30 years.
Yeah.
He was tracking terrorists for the FBI. In July of 2001, he quit because he was tired of being away from home.
Right.
Year after year. So he took the job as head of security at the World Trade Center. He started Monday the 10th. He died Tuesday the 11th. So that was a heavy thing.
Yeah.
The other guy was a guy named Victor Saraceni, who was one of my brother's good friends, and I knew him as well. He was one of the pilots on one of the United Airlines flights that flew into the building. So I heard that the day after.
Yeah.
And I was pretty stunned.
Yeah.
And I wrote this tune, and Levon Helm called me out of the blue. I don't know what to talk about. We were talking about September 11th. It was the next day.
Sure.
And I said, "Hey, Lee, I wrote this tune, and I sang him like a little bit of the ending." And he said, "Mavis Staples should sing that song." And I had met Mavis briefly.
Yeah.
Through the band, because I had done a lot of work with Danko and Levon. So he gave me her number, and I called her.
Yeah.
Left a message. She called me back that day and said, I'd love to hear the song. She said, fax me the lyric. So she gave me her fax number. I faxed her the lyric. She called me back up in 5 minutes. She said, I'll sing that tune. And I said, maybe you haven't heard the song. She said, I'll have to. So that week, I recorded the track. On the 16th, I recorded Mavis. We did that song. Turned out great.
Which song was
It
it?
was called In Times Like These. It's on that record. And then she asked me, she said, Pops had just died.
Pop Staples.
Yeah. And she said, we have a record in the works. Would you finish it with me? I said, of course. So I went to work on that. During that process, I convinced Mavis to do another record. She was done with her solo career at that point. She was not going to do it. She, since her father died, she figured, I'm done.
Yeah.
And Cleotha, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she was kind of taking care of Cleety. And I just said, Mavis, you need to do a record, So that's how that record happened. That was kind of her comeback.
I see.
Into the business as a solo artist. And
just,
that record did well.
Yeah, just talk a bit about how you put together a record for an artist like that.
Well, as you know, Dave, you're an artist yourself. It's all about the tunes. So you got to start with the tunes.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I'm a writer, and we wrote, I think I have 5 tunes on that record. I have 5 tunes. So we started with those. A couple of them Mavis helped. There was a song called Pop's Recipe, which is about Pops. And Mavis was very instrumental in the lyrics of that tune. And then we just went on from there. She found a few songs, and one of them was a song called God Is Not Sleeping, which a guy named Phil Roy wrote. It's a great song.
Yeah.
and he had pitched it to her. He's from Philadelphia, and she was playing in Philly. He went to her show, and backstage after the show pitched her this tune.
Yeah.
She called me from the dressing room to play me the song. I said, Tools, you gotta hear this. And it was a great song.
Yeah.
And by the time she got back, I had a track ready for her, you know. So it's a very inspiring thing to work with an artist like that.
Sure.
You know, because she's so great.
And just give us a bit of a background on what you mean by having the track ready.
Well, I put a track together, and that's a really interesting track. I don't know if I'll get into all that. That particular track, actually Mix Magazine had done some sort of article on that track because the way I did it with Pro Tools. That track was a different song that I had cut years before on a Tascam 8-track. I used to have a little Tascam 8-track in my basement just to do my little demos. You know, it was before people had really good recording equipment in their homes. It was the one that had the, you know, the top that lifts up, you know, and it's got a little board and a machine all in one kind of thing. And I had, you know Mark Walker, percussionist?
Yeah.
Great
yeah,
percussionist.
yeah.
And David Onderdonk?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I had David and Mark come over to do a track with me of a song that Michael Smith had written. For a record I was doing with Cheryl Wilson. So we did this track, and for whatever reasons, it was just a demo, and nothing ever happened with that little demo. That year, I had I had bought Pro Tools. I had one of the first, I think, 10 or so systems they made. I bought Pro Tools really early when it first came out. So I took everything that I had done on that little 8-track, and I transferred it to Pro Tools just to have, you know. So let's fast forward to 2002. 2001, I guess. I think it was still 2001. And I remembered that track. And it had a great percussion track, because Mark Walker's a great percussionist. So I thought, that's a great percussion track that would work on this too.
Oh, wow.
This Phil Royce. So I went digging, I found the track. I put it up, and we did everything in one room. So you can hear David's guitar, the bass came through. Fortunately, I put Cheryl back then in the laundry room and shut the door so her vocal didn't come through, because we did that live in the basement. So I'm thinking, now I can't use this. There's guitar leakage and blah, blah, blah. So as I'm getting ready to turn off, I keep listening, and I start to realize it's got all the right chord changes I need, just not in the right order. So I took that track and I edited it to fit this song. And then I added more stuff to it.
Right.
And when she came to sing it, I never told her the story.
Yeah.
And after it was done, I said, Mavis, I want you to hear something. And I played her the original track, and she refused to believe. Because she didn't know what digital audio Pro Tools, what editing could do.
Yeah.
She just said, Tools, that you can't do that. And I said, well, I did. You know, she said, no. She just, for like a half a day, she wouldn't believe it, you know. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
She was a joy to work with, Mavis.
Yeah,
It was a joy. Yeah. I mean, I remember, you know, when I do a record with a singer, I probably do 5 to 10 takes. I'm not a guy that punches in. I do full takes, and then I edit afterwards. I find the best bits, you know. And it's like everything Mavis did was great. You know, every take was fantastic.
Yeah.
So it made it harder to edit.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you,
What
which
do you
is the
cut out?
best? You know? I mean, I ended up doing it, but it was just unusual. And I remember at some points, like, having to almost touch myself, that this is really happening.
Yeah.
This woman can really sing like that. That there's someone in the world that can sing like that. You know? And I had worked with Aretha Franklin and, what's her name, Patti LaBelle, and a bunch of great singers. And they're all great, but Mavis, out of any of them, was the best. I mean, she just has the most guttural soul, that's sort of bone tingling.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that no one else has.
I just saw her a couple of weeks ago, and it was stunning.
Stunning.
She's so powerful.
Oh, I know.